Eastern.
Well, we're going to turn up the volume. It's been a quiet conference so far, but I figured when we brought Elon Musk in here, I had a chance to meet with Elon when actually Scott Schlegel and I were out in San Jose about a month ago. And this is a man who really knows how to push the envelope and change American manufacturing. I kept staring at this car all morning. I keep worrying about someone left the lights on because in a normal car you'd have to turn the lights off pretty fast before you run down the battery. But Elon told me that battery could probably last a good month before. Yeah. So we had a little controversy what to bring in the room. We were thinking about a rocket. We thought about a number of other things. That was hard to get in, so this was the smallest product we could kind of squeeze into the showroom to get started. So let me ask, when you and I met about a month ago and you just came back from China, you said to me about half your production is going to be exporting. So could you talk a little bit about that and how much is going to China and what that looks like?
Sure. So I actually just came back from China yesterday. In fact, I was there all week until yesterday evening. And the thing that really surprised me was how positive the reception was for Tesla. Going in there, I went in with some trepidation, thinking that there'd be concern about an American car company exporting cars to China, and that maybe they would be somewhere between indifferent to slightly hostile. But actually, I didn't encounter that at all. In fact, they were incredibly friendly and supportive, including modifying some of their programs which offer electric vehicle incentives to include imported electric cars. And they actually made that announcement. For example, Shanghai has this license plate fee that's paid normally for a gasoline car. And on the day that I arrived there, they changed it to include imported electric vehicles as having no license plate fee. So it was just really amazed at the positive reception. And among the public, Tesla is viewed super positively. It was like when I held these customer events to hand over cars, it was like a pop concert. I mean, it was just crazy. But by far the most positive reception of any place I've been. And so we handed over the first Tesla vehicles, production vehicles in China this week to very excited customers. And yeah, we expect probably we'll end up exporting half or maybe a little more than half of the cars we manufacture in California to overseas. And of that number, probably half will go to China alone.
So many companies, mine included, look at exporting after they've saturated the U.S. market. You're clearly not doing that. So maybe you could talk about that. You're early on that you're already going to be exporting close to half your production. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to not sort of saturate one market before moving to another. I mean, it is certainly true that we started deliveries in the U.S. well in advance of deliveries to China. In fact, almost 2 years in advance. So we started off with the deliveries essentially mid-2012 in the U.S. And then a little over a year later started deliveries in Europe. And then about 8 months after that, we started deliveries in China. And now and later this year we'll be starting right-hand drive deliveries for the UK, Japan, Australia, and probably South Africa. Since I'm originally from South Africa, I get a lot of complaints about why the hell the car's not there. But I was like, we're getting there.
Some people compare the Tesla to somewhat like an iPhone on wheels. Is that the right analogy to make? I have two of them right here, but
yeah. I mean, you just basically get some wheels glued on your iPhone and you're good to go. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. So there are certainly some analogies in that direction that make sense. I mean, I do sometimes, in fact, myself refer to it as a computer on wheels. I mean, it's more than an electric car. It's actually, I think, a car that's really designed to take advantage of 21st century technology. So it's got a 17-inch touchscreen display. It's always connected to the internet via cell modem or via Wi-Fi. You can ask for any song anytime just by literally asking for it. So if you hold down the voice button and say, play Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash, it'll play it. You could say, play the Cheese Shop sketch by Monty Python. Anything, like the most obscure thing, the car will actually play it on demand. And it just works. You don't have to do anything. And you can adjust the car's parameters, like the ride height of the vehicle. You can adjust dynamically from the center screen. Soon we'll be releasing real-time traffic, so the cars will collaborate as a networked fleet to optimize the route to your destination. That's going to be pretty exciting. And we're adding a whole bunch more functionality. So the car, even after you bought the car, it keeps getting better because of added software functionality that we download to it at no charge.
And what makes the U.S. a really good platform to manufacture these and export these from the U.S.? Well, assuming it is a good platform.
Yes, we certainly have been accused of that being foolish. But I think I'm someone who believes in manufacturing. I like manufacturing. I like making things. And I think for some reason that got out of fashion. I'm not sure why, but I think if you think of manufacturing not as some boring process of making rote copies, but rather that the manufacturing system that creates the car is itself a very complex machine. And just as innovation applies to the design and engineering of the car, you can apply and should apply innovation to the machine that makes the machine. And you can come up with some really cool new ways to manufacture a vehicle. And I also believe in having a tight feedback loop between engineering and production. And so if production is far away from engineering, you lose that feedback loop. And so someone who designed the car in a particular way doesn't realize that it's very difficult to manufacture the particular way that's designed. But if the factory floor is 50 feet away from their desk, then they can go out and they can just see it, and it's obvious, and they can have a dialogue with the people on the floor. And likewise, a lot of the people in the manufacturing team have great ideas about how to improve the car. But if they're far away, they can't communicate that to the engineers who designed it. So I think that it's something that's often neglected, but having that strong bidirectional feedback loop between engineering and production is really helpful for making the car better and finding efficiencies and lowering the cost.
Where do you think the strongest market's going to be for your car, and also where's competition might come from?
Well, sure. So I think right now the United States is our strongest market, and long term we might actually sell more cars in China than in the U.S. just because the Chinese market is so huge. In fact, last year China became the world's largest car market,
right.
And in fact, it's disproportionately so for premium sedans. I mean, they have somewhat of a bimodal distribution with a very high demand for premium cars and then a very, very high demand for economy cars, and it's sort of a bit of a dip in the middle. And so, for example, for Mercedes S-Classes, more than half of all Mercedes S-Classes last year were sold in China, worldwide. So it was like 2 or 3 times what they sold in the U.S. So given that that's the basis for things, then I would expect, just on sheer numbers, China is probably larger than the U.S. market over time. But that may take a few years to arise.
And we talked a little bit, and many people in this room may be interested. What would this car sell for here? This one here.
So the Tesla car starts at about $70,000 before incentives.
Right.
And with incentives in California, it's about $60,000.
Okay.
Oh, I should say, so one thing that's important to consider, though, is that the cost of electricity is much less than the cost of gasoline. And you also don't have to do smog checks or oil changes or a lot of the things that you'd ordinarily have to spend on maintenance for a gasoline car. So the operating costs are much lower. And the Tesla supercharger network is free, so you have free long distance travel anywhere in the country. So when you net that out, it's somewhere in the order of $12,000 to $15,000 of value. So it's actually like maybe compared apples to apples to a gasoline car, it's maybe like a gasoline car in the mid to high 50s.
Oh. And what's the impediment towards, I know you've talked about a car in the $30,000, $35,000 range. Is that about cost of batteries? What's the technological breakthrough we've got to get through as a country?
Absolutely. So the goal of Tesla from the beginning has been to create an affordable and compelling mass market electric vehicle. But in order to get there, it requires at least 3 major iterations of technology, and it requires very large-scale production. So you've got to have the economies of scale, and you've got to have design iteration. And this has been true of any new technology of any kind that's really ever been introduced. And if you consider, say, cell phones and how they started out, in Wall Street 1, you had this giant brick that the guy was walking down the beach on, talking to a phone the size of a shoebox. And now we've got a phone that's tiny and it's like the power of a supercomputer, and you can buy one for about $100. So that's gone through many design iterations. With electric cars, we're trying to get to mass market in just 3 major design iterations, which is, I think, about as fast as you could do it. And to get from where we are right now to the $35,000 price point, there are a couple things. First of all, that car would be about 20% smaller than the Model S. So just a first approximation, that would drop the cost about 20%. To achieve the other 30% of cost savings, we need to take advantage of the design improvements and the economies of scale. I'm very confident that we can achieve that additional 30% improvement with both of those. In fact, I'd say I am 99% sure. I would be, yeah. So.
Okay, that's 99 is a good number. Let me ask you, we've done more work with your other company, actually. We made you be working with on exports, but mostly on SpaceX. And we've learned that about 60% of U.S. commercial satellites are financed actually by the Export-Import Bank. And there's been a great mushrooming of interest. We recently did a transaction with SpaceX for BulgariaSat. What's driving this whole the satellite industry? Obviously it's iPhones and streaming, but maybe you could give us a little more insight.
You mean what's
driving this whole satellite boom that has actually also been a part of SpaceX story and part of what we've been working on? Can you give us some insight on the satellite marketplace?
Well, I'd say the satellite marketplace isn't quite. The Exim financing may be increasing in recent years, but in terms of the number of satellites, it's a relatively steady flow of commercial satellites. There's about, call it roughly 40 large commercial satellites that are launched every year. And these are satellites that are used for broadcast communications, in some cases weather, mapping, for Google Maps. So there's a whole bunch of satellites of all different types. But it's pretty steady. A bad year might be 30, a good year might be 50, something like that. And where it's really important, where Exim's really important is in helping fund those missions. The money doesn't go to SpaceX. It's really to the satellite operator who wants to operate a particular satellite for a particular purpose, and then they will contract with a satellite maker, and they'll contract with a launch provider, and sometimes that's SpaceX, and then they will try to get the lowest cost of funds to fund that, the Exim's really important in this equation because, the the French have this thing called COFAS, which is very aggressive in providing low-cost funding. And if we didn't have the American sort of, Exim Bank, it would be very difficult for us to compete on the international market because the French tend to favor their domestic rocket company. And so they'll say, well, yes, we'll provide low-cost funding if you use the Ariane rocket. And so it's really important to have the U.S. in our corner with the Exim Bank to counter the actions of COFAS.
And what has changed? I mean, I was, in preparing for today, in the 1980s, there was almost zero commercial satellites launched in the United States. It's now, I'm told, around 10% and growing. What changed that this has become? Is that all SpaceX, or?
It's mostly SpaceX.
Mostly
yeah,
SpaceX.
Yeah. So actually, before the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States used to launch a very high percentage of commercial satellites. In fact, the U.S. was the leader in commercial satellite launch. But with the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian rocket industry was able to figure out how to be capitalist really fast. And they since the USSR had invested so much money in rocket technology, they actually had really good rockets, and arguably the best rocket technology in the world at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union. So they were able to completely take the commercial launch market away from the United States. So the United States went from, within the course of really just a few years, from being the leader in commercial satellite launch to being non-existent virtually. And then the French with the Ariane, and with a little bit of help from Germany and Italy, put a ton of money into the Ariane 5 rocket, also a good rocket. And the world commercial launch market then became essentially divided between the Russians and the French. The Russians probably having about 3/4 of the business, and the French having about 1/4. And that continued on for quite a while until a few years ago when SpaceX started launching the Falcon 9. And since then, we've steadily increased the share of US-1 missions. And I think we're now about 1/4 of all commercial satellite missions are won by a U.S. company, or really won by SpaceX. And I think we've got a decent shot if we keep at it of achieving a majority of the commercial launch market, of winning over a majority of the commercial launch market. That's I don't want to count chickens before they've hatched, but it's looking increasingly positive that we'll probably we'll probably restore the United States to #1 on commercial launches in the world.
You also do a lot of work for the U.S. government and the Air Force in the launch area. What portion of that is your business? Can you talk to us? It's not really, we're on the more commercial side, but
right.
Just to fill it out.
Well, actually, as far as U.S. government launches go, we have a very good relationship with NASA. NASA's been fantastic to work with and really has helped us a lot. And in fact, I'm not sure we'd even be where we are today without the help of NASA. So we're very, very grateful to them. NASA selected us as the primary system for transferring cargo to and from the space station. And so, in fact, our Dragon spacecraft is the only spacecraft capable of taking any significant cargo down from the space station. So there are a variety of means of getting to the space station, but in terms of bringing experiments back, which is critical to leverage the value of the space station, our spacecraft is the only one capable of doing that. I'd like to also maybe note that we get paid half as much per mission as Orbital Sciences, so there's another provider. And they only take stuff up. They take up less than we do, and they take nothing down. and they get paid twice as much per mission as we do. But that's okay. I mean, I'm
Not for the U.S. taxpayers.
no, I mean, I think maybe they should get fewer missions in the future, but you know, I'm glad that we're able to, you know, provide a service that's twice the value for money that you know, our competitor does.
When I was out at SpaceX about a year ago, I noticed that you were also developing a recyclable rocket, a rocket that actually come back to Earth.
Yeah.
That would be the ultimate recyclable. Can you talk
Yes.
to us about that?
Well, this is the fundamental breakthrough that's needed in space transport to fundamentally transform it. Because I think what we've done thus far at SpaceX is evolutionary, but not revolutionary. You know, we've made a rocket that, in an expendable scenario, it's better than anything else out there. You know, by maybe 20, like the next best rocket would be like 20 to 30% worse in efficiency. So, but that's definitely an evolutionary thing. It's not going to revolutionize spaceflight. To really have a revolutionary impact, we've got to achieve at least an order of magnitude improvement, maybe a 2 order of magnitude improvement. And the only way to achieve that is with full and rapid reusability. And this is a very difficult thing to achieve. In fact, a lot of people in the aerospace industry think it's not possible. And in fact, most have given up on it. But I think it is possible. And we recently achieved an important milestone, which was to get the boost stage of the rocket to re-enter the atmosphere intact, deploy landing legs, and achieve a soft landing out in the ocean. So we're first doing this in the ocean to make sure we can land accurately, and then hopefully later this year we will transition to landing back on land at Cape Canaveral. And then we'll aim to refly that boost stage probably next year, if this year works out. And that will really be a massive change in space transport. To give it sort of a sense of the potential there, the cost of the fuel and oxygen and other sort of expandable liquids in the rocket, the cost to effectively fuel it up, is only 0.3% of the cost of the mission. So the rocket costs $60 million. It only costs a couple $100,000 to fill it up. So the potential is there with a high launch rate, if one can achieve full and rapid reusability, to improve the cost of space access by a factor of more than 100.
Wow. Any advice? What could we as citizens do? What could the U.S. government do to make this a better place to support business, make America even a better place to start a business? You came from South Africa. What else could we be doing to improve that from your point of view?
Well, I think the United States is pretty great, honestly. Definitely the best place in the world to start a business, and particularly if it involves technology. You know, I think certainly we need to take a look at our immigration laws. You know, if there are really talented people, you know, doing graduate courses in engineering at our universities, we really don't want to send them home. We want to try to do everything we can to keep them here, because like if for every one person who's like an ace engineer, that there are probably like 10 jobs that will be created if that person stays here. It's a huge multiplier effect. And conversely, if you're missing that special ingredient, you know, it's very difficult to create them. I think also we probably need to reform our tax laws, because the U.S. corporate tax rate is really high relative to, say, the EU. And what this causes companies to do, like, you know, Apple or Google or others, SpaceX is a purely domestic company, so
and we're happy about that.
Yeah. So you know, we don't have the ability to play, you know, sort of some sort of tax shell game. And we wouldn't, but anyway, but it is tricky. Like if you're head of a multinational and you've got all these shareholders who are expecting you to maximize profits, and you can play this sort of like international tax shell game, and you sort of there's a strong incentive to do so because of the U.S. tax rate being way out of whack with almost any other country. What this causes companies like Apple and Google to do is to invest a ton of money in other countries.
Right.
So this is a big gift that we're giving to other countries. So instead of getting those, sort of ace engineers and others to move to the U.S. and create a bunch of jobs here, we're actually funding them there to create jobs there. I mean, it's quite a nice thing we're doing, but it's probably not in the best interest.
Overly generous.
It's very generous.
Very generous.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a final question because we're going to wrap up. You have 5 sons. It's always hard to be a cool dad. What do your kids think is the coolest thing about Dad?
I'm not sure.
The rockets, the cars?
They don't seem too excited about these things because I kind of grew up. I take them to the factory and it's like, is this exciting? They're like, oh, we've seen it 20 times. Like,
you get more excitement out of it than they do.
Really? Yeah. No, I know. I mean, maybe they were secretly excited and they just didn't want to let on that, to me. But I do try to get them excited about these things, and but they seem to be like more excited about like if I play a video game with them. That seems to be like their favorite thing. I mean, they're only like the twins are 10 and the triplets are 7, so they're on the fairly young side.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Let's give them a round of applause.
If you missed any of our coverage of the Export-Import Bank Conference, you'll find it at cspan.org. Writing about legislation ahead, Billy House from National Journal says a decision is due on September 30th on whether to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank, recharter it with reforms, or even wind down legislation, or simply let it expire. The bank supports loans to overseas companies to help them buy U.S. exports, and many conservatives are signaling another battle to block its charter. That's from National Talk Eastern.
Well, we're going to turn up the volume. It's been a quiet conference so far, but I figure when we brought Elon Musk in here, I had a chance to meet with Elon when actually Scott Schlegel and I were out in San Jose about a month ago. And this is a man who really knows how to push the envelope and change American manufacturing. I kept staring at this car all morning. I keep worrying about someone left the lights on because in a normal car you'd have to turn the lights off pretty fast before you run down the battery. But Elon told me that battery could probably last a good month before. Yeah. So we had a little controversy what to bring in the room. We were thinking about a rocket. We thought about a number of other things. That was hard to get in, so this was the smallest product we could kind of squeeze into the showroom to get started. So let me ask, when you and I met about a month ago and you just came back from China, you said to me about half your production is going to be exporting. So could you talk a little bit about that and how much is going to China and what that looks like?
Sure. So I actually just came back from China yesterday. In fact, I was there all week until yesterday evening. And the thing that